This series is sponsored by the Old School Football Shop.
Old School Football is a UK-based retro football company honouring the rich history of football past by creating high-quality embroidered vintage team crests on t-shirts, polos, hoodies and scarves. Minimalist badges from the 1800s right up to the 1990s.
On the website oldschoolfootball.co.uk, you can find English League and non-league, Scottish football, international teams and even rugby. And what's more, until the end of the lockdown podcast, listeners can get 10% off their whole catalogue plus free UK delivery. Just use the code HONEST10 at checkout for 10% off.
You can follow them on Twitter at OSF Shop, Instagram at Old School Football Shop, TikTok at Old School Football, Facebook at Old School Football Shop, and don't forget, just use HONEST10 at the checkout for 10% off.
Hello and welcome to Coaching Diaries, a new series from the Honest Football Podcast. I'm Charlie Betts and I'm a part-time football coach and a PE teacher. As a teacher, I've always been fascinated by the way coaching works in different sports and the impact that can have on me as a football coach. Over the next few weeks, we're going to meet different expert coaches from different parts of the sporting world. We're really going to drill down into their philosophies, values and techniques of their field and find out what makes them so great at their discipline and how it can improve both you and me as coaches and as people. If you like what you hear, then don't forget to like, share and subscribe and comment below on anything that you've drawn from this series that you might want to share with others. Next up is one of the busiest coaches we will meet in this series. It's netball expert Beccy Lewis. Beccy is a former academy and county player whose love of the game continued when she went to university. Following graduation, Beccy became a coach and initially plied her trade in Australia. Since returning to the UK, Beccy has coached in a multitude of settings from youth all the way through to adults, including Super League's Surrey Storm, Leeds Rhinos and now England Netball. Beccy is very honest about the trials and tribulations of being a coach, and this interview really challenged me about the benefits of coaching outside your comfort zone. You can find Beccy on Twitter at BeccyLewis18 and you can email Beccy at blccoachingnetball@gmail.com. And as always, you can find us and our content at Honest Football Free. Introducing netball expert Beccy Lewis. And I'm pleased to say that Beccy Lewis is with me now. Beccy, thank you so much for coming onto the show. Really appreciate you giving up your time.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
No problem. So tell us about your background in netball. I sort of did some research on you. You've got such an impressively long CV, but it's better come from you rather than me. So where did it all sort of start from you, maybe as a player, or did you sort of just go straight into coaching, if that makes sense?
So I certainly started from the player route, which you'll often find with netball coaches. It always starts with the playing side. So I admired everyone in primary school who used to win everything and kind of wanted to always be on that winning team. So played netball from the age of 10. Played all my life, clubs, counties, academies, that sort of thing, all the way up to university where I went to study sports coaching. That's really for me when the netball love penny dropped, I think. So got my degree sports coaching and that's where I kind of made my netball contacts really. I've got my two coaching mentors, who's Chris Welburn at the FA and Anna Carter, who's director of Leeds Rhinos Netball. And my netball kind of took me from there. I kind of got into a bit of a rut with my coaching. I kind of wanted to experience more. My coaching was taking over my playing and I wanted to really expand my knowledge on the game. So little old me took myself over to Australia, who are the best in the world. So I wanted to figure out why they are the best and bring that all home with me. So I did just under a year over in Australia, playing, coaching, being coached, and brought that all back home, which was great. I came home with such a variation of knowledge about the whole game from youngsters all the way through to adults. So took that knowledge over to Surrey Storm, who are one of the Super League franchise teams, as I was one of their development coaches, which I absolutely loved being in Guildford, loved the team, loved the whole, again, learning development of it all. Came back home to Liverpool, which is where my family are at the minute. was head of netball in a school. Again, a different side of the game that I learned more. And now back to where I started my netball journey, well, in Yorkshire. I started my uni degree in Leeds, and now I'm back in Sheffield working for England Netball, and I'm also a self-employed coach, so which I did with Yorkshire Jets over in Leeds as well. So yeah, explored a wide variety of the game, from social to babies at 5-year-olds playing and to performance academy stuff. So yeah, I've learned a lot on the way. Highs and lows, of course, and a competitive side, but yeah, absolutely love every bit of it.
If you don't mind me asking, because I've interviewed a few coaches through this, and so many have gone off to a different country and sort of brought back maybe different ways of looking at things in their particular sport. Do you feel like, I mean, it's particularly Australia, obviously it's, you know, it's sport mad and has such a great reputation for sport. When you came back here, do you feel like you had a bit of an edge over maybe other people who were sort of maybe coaching at the same level or in the same area as you, but hadn't had that other experience, if that makes sense? Does it give you an edge, or do you sort of feel, actually, I suppose that's the question, actually. Did you come back feeling like you've got an advantage over other people in that sense?
You know what? Not so much, because everything that I learned over in Australia, I adapted to me. Yeah. So I kind of picked up things that I liked and things that I didn't like, and kind of adapted it to a way of a delivery style which I liked or which I needed at the time. But to be honest, I do think people kind of went, "Oh, go to her. She's got some good activities." You know, just little things that I learned and gone, "That's really good. I'll use that." And then someone's gone, "She's just been to Australia. Go and ask her." Which probably isn't the best thing to do, but yeah, I did. I came home with 3 new qualifications coaching, just because Australia have so many different stepping stones in that coaching pathway. So yeah, maybe a little bit, but again, I did adapt it to what I needed.
So in terms of that sort of, you know, you were saying that sort of background, what are you doing with England Netball now? Because I know you sort of alluded to it, but what does that sort of look like on a day-to-day basis for you, if that makes sense?
Yeah, so I'm a netball development officer. I cover the North Yorkshire area of Yorkshire, so all the way from Scarborough to Skipton, kind of York, Harrogate area. So what we do in the development world is I set up clubs, sessions, so people doing back to netball, so those young mums or older mums trying to get back into activity that they don't really want to go to the gym, but they remembered netball at school and wanted a bit more of a social side, which I'm a big lover of. I think sport is socially is the best part of it. So I'm a big lover of that. And we also do walking netball, which it does pull on my heartstrings, seeing little nanas knitting netballers and you know, having a little go in the community hall. I absolutely love that. So that's what I'm doing in North Yorkshire.
Right, just on a quick I'm going off a completely different tangent here, but it's something I've always felt sort of quite passionate about. In terms of men's netball, is there much in the way of that? And the reason I ask, and I'm not ashamed to admit this, I've always wanted to have a go at it, but where the area that I'm in, so in Bedfordshire, there's literally nothing. And I think we'll talk about it a bit later on, but the cross-transferable skills, I know aside from the social element, but just to make you a better sport, you know, netball is such a great sport for various reasons, but you know, so many skills you can use in netball can be then transferred to other sports. But it just doesn't seem to be much of a men's netball scene where I am. I don't know if it's different where you are, or if there is at all, really. You
know what, I absolutely love the fact that you want to give it a go. I think that's absolutely brilliant. It's great for our sport as well. And men's netball is growing. It's absolutely brilliant. In Australia, it's just a thing. Everybody plays, mixed team, men's teams, whatever. Over here, England have just got their own men's team. Right. We call them the Knights, I believe. Right. And there's a Northern Titans men's team. Men just bring such a different element to the game. It's quicker. Obviously, they're a lot taller. And they're so much more creative. You know, just passing the ball, doing simple skills, they just bring something totally new. I'm currently coaching a university, and in our varsity prep, the big game at the end of the season, I brought in a men's team for some competition.
Right.
And you know what? It was brilliant to see. The girls were kind of shocked at how good these men were, because I think they were a bit on edge at first to think, oh, they're just going to be men and run into you, or, because that men who don't know the game can kind of just stand on your feet, and it's not really netball, but these men can play. So they did give them some good competition. So that in the Super League, higher up in the game, in the pre-season, in the women's league, the pre-season, they got the men's team in for some competition as well.
Right.
I do think it just brings a totally different angle to the game. You have to play what you're up against and be creative with it. Again, what these coaches are doing in the Super League is absolutely brilliant. But men's netball is definitely on the up, and I compete in a mixed tournament every summer, and God, it's the best day of the summer. I absolutely love it. And I train the men from loads of different teams, and they all come for the 4 weeks before. We train them up, because I don't want to play against people that don't know the rule.
No, of course, no.
I'm going to teach them how to play, and then makes the tournament that little bit more interesting. And they love it. They look forward to it every year. So I made up you want to give it a go.
So is that, just really, really quickly, is there a reason why we don't, I know obviously going back, girls was netball, boys was football, all that at school, which is something, as a PE teacher, I try and get away from now. But is there a reason why we don't necessarily have a mixed environment? Because I know obviously in football, for example, it's a lot more physical contact than, in terms of, be careful the way I word this, but you can maybe see to a point why we haven't got mixed football teams yet. But in terms of netball, where there's a bit less contact, I know I'm not naive to think that there's no sort of a jostling or any, a bit shoving or whatever. But in terms of that, is there a reason why we don't really have a more high-profile sort of mixed thing, why we can't mix together? Or is it just almost a psyche sort of thing, really, that we're conditioned almost to think that netball is still predominantly a girls' sport, if that makes sense? A women's sport, sorry.
So I think the UK are a little bit behind the times. Right. I think probably give us about 5 years, and men's netball or mixed netball will definitely be up in the runnings of a highly participated sport. Like I say, Australia just do it. Yeah. That's just part of what they do. And we are just that little bit behind them. So it was actually 2 years ago today where the England team beat the Aussies in the Commonwealth Gold Final. Yes. And for me, I think that changed netball on a world scale. So I think that just makes that 5-year gap that little bit smaller on how the game's growing and how it's developing. So just going from the elite level all the way to mixed netball on a social level, I think the big participation is what we see on the telly. So I think it'll come. Just not yet. No, that's a fair comment. No, sorry, that was slightly self-indulgent. That, sorry for I went off a bit of a tangent. No, great.
But so obviously we've got you here to talk about you as a netball coach. We'll go a bit more about specifically in terms of maybe a relationship between football and netball and different ways of coaching a bit later on. But just to find out a little bit more about you as a coach first of all. So I think we sort of touched on why you wanted to coach. So I'm sort of going to link that to the other question. Sort of A, why did you want to coach? But also B, when you started coaching, what would you say your principal philosophy or sort of values were going into it? And then we'll talk a bit. I don't want to overload your question. So how was it at the beginning for you, I suppose, is what I'm saying.
So I really wanted to start coaching netball because I loved the game. And I wanted to be in the game as much as I possibly could. And I actually started coaching because of my bronze DV, and I had to volunteer. And I ended up with a really good team, and I absolutely loved coaching it. And I must have only been about 15, but I found myself sitting and planning and looking at all the different girls and what their strengths and weaknesses are, and probably a load of rubbish back then, but it really kind of grabbed me in. And then when it kind of got to sixth form time, I thought, right, I've got to kind of put this in a path of what I'm going to do with my life. And it was my coach actually at the time who went, go to Leeds, that's the heart of netball. And so obviously I looked into a sports coaching degree. I didn't even know that was a thing at the time. As soon as I got there, I was like, wow, this is the best thing in the world. Like, this is me. So, but that's really when I got into my coaching, got my teeth stuck in. But to be honest, I just wanted to be involved in the game. It was a great game that was continuously growing, and now I'm right smack bang in the middle of the heart of the growth of netball. Like, the Netball World Cup was just in my hometown. Like, that is just a dream come true. So I'm very passionate about it, and so lucky to be involved.
No, I think that's amazing. I think that's, believe it or not, only from the sort of research I've done and through speaking to people at the minute through this, so many people will probably be maybe a similar path to myself, where through injury had to stop playing and then go into coaching. But I think you're actually a bit of a rarity, which is really refreshing to hear, that from such a young age and in such an early stage of your playing career, for the want of a better phrase, you know, you want to almost extend that relationship with netball, really. Because I think I don't know what you think, when you start to coach, it definitely affects you as a player. I don't know what you think. Well, I found that anyway. I sort of did a little bit of coaching, and then I ruptured 2 ligaments in my knee and couldn't sort of play properly anymore. So because of that, I then had to sort of do the coaching a lot more. But I found that period where I was doing a bit of coaching and playing, my sort of playing, the way I played football was completely different to before. Because I think you just think on a different level, don't you, almost? But from your story, I suppose maybe you don't know any different because you started coaching at such a young age, really. I don't know. So how does it affect you as a player, I suppose, is what I'm asking.
Yeah, it's kind of very similar, really, because I've had seasons playing in and coaching, and, you know, sometimes the coaching takes over your playing season. So I've had, on a whole scale, I think it was about 2 years out of playing. And geez, that was the hardest 2 years. And then when I went back into playing and coaching, I was a different player. Just all of the things that I'd learned. Because I'd played for a year in Australia, then came back home and was off for 2 years. And kind of never got the opportunity to put into practice what I was learning as I was going. So yeah, I do think that playing and coaching has its benefits, but if you put that on its head, and if you're a player coach, I think I absolutely admire people that do that, because I do think that's a hard, like, being a captain and playing is hard.
Yeah.
But like the likes of Tamsin Greenway was a player coach and had the most success that was possible over her time, and Mickey Austin's just taken over and is doing that as well with Surrey Storm. And what they're doing is unbelievable, because they're still striving as players and as well for their team and the fans, and they've grasped that down to a T, and really admire that, because that's a hard skill to have.
Yeah, I think you touched on a great point there. You know, we're going off on a slightly different tangent, but I think that's great, that being a player coach in the team that you're playing with, I think, is so difficult. I think because you when you become a coach, you're the other side of the fence almost, aren't you? In the sense of, I found anyway, the relationship you have with the players as a coach is very different to what it is as a player. And the team that I coached most recently was actually a team I used to play for. So some of the lads are still there. And it's so hard. That relationship is completely different, because you're almost seen as a bit more of an authoritative figure than what you were before. And I think doing that, so like you say, it's kudos to those sorts of to those people who can do that, really. But yeah, sorry, moving on, Beccy. So you said obviously that's how you were when you started. Do you feel like your outlook and philosophy has changed to where you are now, in the sense of over that coaching journey? Do you still feel, so you said you sort of went into the coaching just because it felt like a natural thing to do, and you wanted to make yourself sort of a better player, and various other reasons. Do you still feel like that's your motivation now, or do you have sort of a different outlook and philosophy on netball, if that makes sense?
My outlook on netball and my philosophy is changing every year, every season. I think when I first actually wrote down my philosophy, it was about an aim and like winning a season, and it's so much more than that. Like my philosophy is about the atmosphere that a coach creates. It's being able to create an environment that gets the best out of your players or that team. So even when I'm coaching an academy or the university or the 5-year-olds, it's still something I strongly believe in, but I can adapt that with my coaching styles to be able to pull the best out of them. So kind of when I first started coaching, I was like, this is my aim, this is how I'm going to do it, and that's the way it's going to be. And that doesn't work with the different variations of players or athletes that you have. Some people just coach one team, which, you know what, that's the dream. That is an absolute dream. But for example, at the university, I've got 4. So and other academies and stuff. So you do have to be able to adapt, and it's taken a while to be able to have something that I fully believe in, that I can adapt to different scenarios, different ages, different styles of the game. So I do think that setting a tone of your session gets the best out of the players, but it also gets you your respect. And like you were saying, coaching your teammates, that's hard. So being able to put yourself on a little bit of a step up to gain that authority, but you can still go for a pint with them after, that you need to be able to hold that balance. So that's something that's kind of I've learned later in my coaching. But something that I've believed in from the very beginning is coaching the whole player. I think a holistic approach of coaching. Without that, I just don't think it works. If someone can prove me wrong, then that would be great. But I think being able to develop an athlete or a team physically, mentally, technically, and tactically over a season, without that, I don't feel that you'll get the best out of your athlete. If you're just going, we just need to be fit, we just need to be able to run, and it doesn't work. But that's something that I've always believed in. So to get them two together is hard and takes a little bit of adapting to, especially at pre-season time or at the beginning or coming back after Christmas, whatever the level it is. Philosophy-wise, they're the 2 main points that I like to stick to.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I think sort of football, I think, is probably years behind other sports in that sense of it's still very much win at all costs and just focuses very much on the sort of technical and the tactical thing. So I think that's fantastic that you've alluded to that, really. Just on that then, because this leads brilliantly onto the next sort of discussion, is, you've just mentioned, you have so many different hats that you have to wear in terms of your coaching because of the different teams that you're involved in, your sort of job. I suppose you're coaching people of different quality and different backgrounds and different stages in terms of their development. But how do you know when you have sort of delivered a good session? And the reason I ask that is I've only learned recently that sometimes like the messiest or the session where you come away thinking, do you know what, I think that was a disaster. It didn't flow very well, or, that kind of thing actually turned out in terms of the progress of the players to probably be a better session than the one where, everything goes all shiny and sort of runs through. So, but because you're coaching lots of different teams, how do you know when you've sort of delivered a good session, if that makes sense?
That's a really, really tough question. To know when a session's gone well, I think that obviously, depending on the level, but as long as everyone's smiling on the way out, that's a nice little one for me. But I do think that when I feel that they've worked hard and when I've worked hard, so like coaching sometimes can be exhausting because the different cogs are turning in your brain and things like that. And I feel like, especially with the more elite teams, when you've got them into a challenge that makes them have a little bit of a little bit of autonomy, that they can, when seeing the penny drop, and that can come 4 weeks after you've set this challenge or whatever.
Yes. Yeah.
I think when you're seeing penny drops, that's when your session's going well. But for me, I see that in a game. Yeah. So within netball, it's I want to get the best out of my players so they can make the right decisions in different scenarios. Because like any team sport, you've got to deal with what you're coming up against, and for them to be able to break that down at the right time is when you've got a smart player. So as a coach, it'd be my responsibility to set them up in these scenarios and for them to be able to figure it out in their own time, which, you know, that can be really, really broad. That could be, I'm not saying that, you know, we want to break down X, Y, and Z all in one session, but it's being able to allow them the opportunity to practice them skills to be able to break it down. So for that to happen, you can only really see in a game when oppositions have got tactics coming up against you. But when it's little ones or a social session or, you know, something a little bit more fun, I think, when there's lots of laughs and everyone's smiling, or when they've learned something and you can see it happening, that's what gives me that little warm fuzzy feeling. I go, oh, that hard work's paid off. They understand it now, or you can do it now, or that sort of thing. But on the more of an elite scale, it's over a certain period of time, and I'll sit in my car and a voice note on my phone. I go, this has happened, that didn't go well, that went well, on to next week. And I've got all these little voice notes in my phone, and I think, let's go back to that week 3. How did that go? And then I might revisit it again and go, right, let's adapt that and change that. And it might go even worse the following time. You know, it doesn't always go plain sailing, but that's the challenge of coaching, I suppose, which we all like. But I think it's really hard to see.
Yeah, I think you touched on something sort of really important there, that as coaches, sometimes, you know, you can be quite impatient. And actually one of the biggest and best skills of a coach is to be patient enough, like you say, to maybe have to wait 3 or 4 games before you see that you know, your hard work come to fruition, I suppose, in that sense.
Yeah.
I think, you know, I do agree with you. I think it's just sometimes you're not always afforded that luxury of that, though, are you? Particularly, I suppose, more with the elite level, where results are so important in sort of that level of the game compared to, like you say, maybe the sort of younger ones or the sort of social sessions, really, in that sense. So
it is. It's true, and especially with I keep mentioning them, but the university girls, you kind of throw all these random girls together that they don't even know each other, then expect some results. So it starts September, and then just before we leave for Christmas, the pennies dropping.
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out how I can bring that a little bit further forward. But that's the challenge. Like, it's a hard one, trying to learn their names, never mind to get them to gel together instantly. But yeah, it's just being able to put them in a scenario that you can get that little winning moment.
No, definitely. And I think, just to sort of sum that up, I think you're you know, when you're talking about working with university and you know, people who already established and know the game to a certain degree anyway, it's actually harder to see that progress. You know, you mentioned about the under 5s, and, you know, through my background through teaching, it's so much easier to see progress in children that age who go from pretty much never having played the sport to then suddenly being able to do X, Y, and Z. And that it's a lot more instant sort of feedback. And I do actually think that, although it's harder in terms of maybe management of, you know, behavior and all sorts of kids that age, in terms of the satisfaction and feedback you get, it's a lot quicker and probably a lot greater than what it is maybe at the elite level or the higher up, you know, you go in that sense. I just want to... Oh, sorry, Beccy, sorry. Go on.
No, that was right. It was totally agreeing with what you're saying, and the whole holistic approach with it would be, for the younger ones, the physical aspect would become bigger, or the more able netballers, the more tactical it'll be. So it's always a nice one to come back to and to be able to pinpoint where you can see that success. Yeah. I totally agree.
So I'm just going to move on, and this is sort of this is as much self-indulgent for me as what it is other coaches sort of listening. But, you know, I'm sure across the various places that you've coached, you sometimes get a bit of negativity from, you know, a player, whether it be a teenager or, you know, an adult or whatever. And really, what's your sort of strategies for dealing with that? And when I mean negativity, it might not, you know, I'm not saying they storm off and start throwing bibs around or whatever, but just might be that they're not engaged. Yeah, it's true. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But sometimes when I've asked that, people have gone to, you know, they sort of think like it's when someone's threatening to leave the club or whatever. But sometimes it can just be they're not engaged. But, you know, what sort of strategies do you use to maybe keep people, you know, who are maybe displaying signs of, right, we're starting to lose them? How do we keep them involved in that sort of sense?
Yeah, that's a good question. Sorry to say this, but it helps being a girl in a girl
Right.
world. I'm teaching netballers in schools, academies, teenage girls. You know, they can be quite sassy sometimes and quite stropping. But obviously we've all been through it and we understand it. So it's knowing when high days are and when the low days are, which is hard. It is really hard. I coach Leeds Rhinos Academy, under 15s and under 13s. So that's prime age group for them. And we kind of got to a point in the season where we thought we're losing them here. Let's understand why. So we give them a player profile wheel and just give different kind of aspects of the game and then ask them to fill it in for how well they think they're doing. And then we can kind of compare and contrast what we think. So some of the kind of categories was mentally, session preparation, you know, all these little things. And it's kind of just highlighted to them what they don't just turn up to training and leave. We're asking more of that. And it kind of, without us telling them, it was them seeing what they actually think and what they believe they're doing. So they'd really picked up again. And I don't know if that was why, or it was just kind of that point in the season, but it was just highlighting that we're slowing down a bit now. We're not seeing as much progression as we would have liked, or we're not at that stage just yet. Why isn't it? So we had to break it down and because it's an academy for Yorkshire. There's people over in Hull, there's some Sheffield, Leeds. They're not easy to access really. So it was made sure it was all online and made sure everyone was participating in it, just like we all are in this awkward time. But to be able to identify it is hard. See, with the social adults, they just kind of don't come for a few weeks. And
exactly.
then they might join back again and be a totally different person, which is totally fine, which is great. You just need that few weeks. But when you've got aims and targets and performance targets to go by, there's no time for that. So you've got to kind of identify it quickly. And with girls, that can be from 1 week to the next. And
of course.
With others as well. But like the mental side of sport is big for any athlete. Being picked up or dropped, or you know, that's hard to take. And these athletes who are going on the pathways, they're working hard and they've got to kind of earn their place. But in netball, it's very much a team thing. That you've got to be a part of the team, because that's where your support network comes from, on court and off court, when you're working for each other. Because the players might see someone's not 100% right before the coach does. But to be able to have that team and that unit around you, I think is a really, really big part of netball, whatever level. But it's not an easy one to identify.
No, I think that's a brilliant answer. Actually, I love the way you said about that sort of player profile. I think that's something I think I'll use actually, even in terms of my practice and that. So I really appreciate you being so honest about that, Beccy. Just really quickly, it was something I was going to go on to later, but since you're on that sort of topic of pathways, how, and this is coming completely from a layman, how does that work? Because I'm right in thinking that Leeds Rhinos are going to be a Super League team. Is it next year? Have I got that right?
Yeah, good knowledge.
There's a bit of research. But no, so in terms of that, so you're coaching these under 13s and 15s. How does it work for them to then end up at the very top of the tree, in terms of whether it being representing a team in the Super League or going on to play for their country? Because, how does that pathway work? Is it via university, for example, and such like?
Well, the Netball Super League has recently gone through the franchise route.
Right.
Slowly but surely, it's kind of turning that way. So you've got the likes of Leeds Rhinos who are connected to the rugby, Wasps as well, and there's a few others. But they are their own franchises now, which is only a good thing. I believe it's more sustainability for the sport, and each franchise teams. So these athletes, the under 13s and under 15s, they're at the very beginning of the journey, which is so exciting. I wish it was all there when I was their age, but so they're part of the academy. So we've got different kind of aspects to the pathway. We've got a community pathway, and then we've got the academy pathway, which goes from under 13s, 15s, and then you've got kind of the competition squads. So you kind of select athletes from them academies into the competition squad, and they play against the other franchises. So, for example, Loughborough Lightning and Wasps and that sort of thing. So that goes a little bit more competitive, and then you're still trialing each year, but that's your journey really through the pathway. So then you go up to under 17s, under 19s, under 21s, and then the Super League, which is going to be next season, which fingers crossed this COVID-19 won't affect League Rhinos' entry into it, but it's all very exciting, and you can really see Yorkshire getting behind it as well, which is so lovely to see, because we used to have Yorkshire Jets, but they sadly ended. So having Leeds Rhinos back in just kind of gives these pathway girls a little bit of an eye line of where they want to be and what they can do, especially when they're wearing the kit. They feel like an athlete. They feel part of the Leeds Rhinos family, and I'm sure that's with any club. You really feel a part of it, and you know your aspirations are to wear that. Well, for us, it's the netball dress. So when they're seeing the girls on the telly playing against England players and things like that, they know it's achievable, and that's always in sight. It's always something that I throw in every now and then. Is where do you aim to be? What do you want to do in the netball trainers? So I think the Leeds Rhinos pathway is very strong, and the success that they've had is only going to grow further. It's really exciting to be a part of.
So that's obviously, you were saying about the sort of inspiration of getting there. Is it part of your job with the 13s and the 15s to then unfortunately do the other side of that, which is to maybe say to a girl that, at the minute, this is maybe, essentially sort of not releasing them, but and how does that work? And the reason I asked that was when I was a sort of a teenager, I was at a couple of professional clubs, and basically once you got released from there, unless you got picked up quite quickly, you just slipped through the net. And I was never good enough to be a professional, but the sort of principle was that I was sort of released by two different teams, and then that was it really. There's no sort of, like you were saying, the different pathways of development teams, and I had to just sort of go and find my own sort of way. So I suppose there was two parts of that question really. Was A, do you have to personally do that and maybe tell, unfortunately, a girl that you're not going to quite be good enough at the minute, and then B, what happens if they are sort of released, for want of a better word, from the academy at Leeds Rhinos, etc.
Tough one. It's never easy to be able to say that. Within the academy, it would be my job to identify it, to say I don't think this athlete's quite ready yet, or isn't at our level, and it wouldn't be me to say it. It can be me, but it needs to go through the proper procedures and things like that. So if for example, it's never happened in my academy, but if there was a player that wasn't quite ready for our standard, there is the hubs, is what we call them. So it goes kind of down the community pathway, and that we can say, you're going to go into this training hub, gain a little bit more experience and knowledge, and then come back to us next season, come and trial again, and then hopefully you'll have that little bit more behind you to hold your own in our kind of academy, in a roundabout way. But there is always a direction that we can put them in, which is an absolute asset to have as part of the pathway. So just because we have, it's a community one, that can be for any athlete, any netballer that wants to gain more netball experience, that wants to wear the Leeds Rhinos training tops, whatever. But they're all very, very good coaches. So no matter what academy or hub the athlete's in, they will be gaining really good netball knowledge and experience. So I would be more than happy to say, go and experience this hub and then come back to us, because then it kind of gets you in a running step going forwards then. But it's never happened with us yet, and I hate it to ever happen, but it wouldn't come from me, it would come from those higher up head office. But I have done things like that before, which is never easy.
No.
But has to be done, I'm afraid.
Yeah, no. I think it's fantastic. Like, particularly you was just saying there about the fact that there's that almost like that safety net underneath the elite, the academy, or that there's still places to go, because I think so many other sports, and I can't even really speak properly from a football perspective, are not very good at that. So I think that's brilliant. What I'm going to do, Becky, because I'm conscious I don't want to keep you all day, because I'm sure you've got other stuff to be doing. But we're going to move a little bit more about the. I suppose it's just a bit more the nuts and bolts of coaching netball. And there's not loads to go through on this, but just to sort of compare maybe certain aspects of how you would coach netball to football, really, in that sense. So one thing that I've always found difficult as a coach, particularly working with adults, and I'm thinking maybe when you're working with, maybe the university teams, etc., is trying to get them to focus on those sort of basic technical skills again and again. So I'm just wondering, from your perspective, how much of when you're coaching a team is spent on those sort of core skills of just throwing and catching, for the one of, I know there's probably loads more to it than that, but from a layman's perspective, how much of your sessions are devoted to that, and how do you keep them engaged in that? Because sometimes with football, trying to go back to the basics, it's so hard, because there's a lot of egos and a lot of there's a lot to work through just to get them to keep developing that, and try and explain almost, I suppose, that it underpins a lot of what we're going to move on to, is being able to do that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm sure in any sport, to say, oh yeah, well, I can kick a ball, or yeah, of course I can catch. It's not easy to say, well, in that situation you couldn't. So what I tend to do is I tie all the basics into my warm-up,
right?
So or into fitness elements of the game. So I do a lot of netball fitness. So it's kind of in netball, in your third quarter, your fourth quarter is where your fatigue starts to kick in. So the passes aren't going to go as fast, they're not going to go as strong, and to be able to do that at the time when it matters the most is when it's most important. So to be able to go back to a team to say, oh, this is your scoreline, you dropped 10 goals in that quarter, why? We're tired. Okay, well, why? Were we not throwing hard, blah, blah, blah. So to throw it into my warm-up is, I kind of do, obviously, I do a little fun warm-up game, stretches and all that jazz, but I always do the ball skills. So that's 50 of each pass, both hands, make sure that you can throw and catch with both hands. I know that's something like you footballers probably go, of course I can kick with my left foot, but when it comes down to a time in a game when you actually need to, are you gonna use your left hand? Are you gonna use your left foot? So it's putting them in them scenarios to go, yes, I can do it, because I've been doing it all season, and I can build that up, because I can guarantee that they'll say they can, but not always does it work. So yeah, and netball fitness kind of goes hand in hand. It's using them skills when you are most tired, and then after any sort of fitness or warm up or whatever, I always make the shooters shoot, because even once they've done the hard work and upper body or whatever, you still got to be able to put the goals in the net. So we call them fatigue shots, and I make sure that they get 10 out of 10, because you can take them from anywhere, but at the end of the day, that's how we win games, and that pressure comes from them individuals. So if they have to do that little bit more in training, then they've got to. So yeah, doing the simple skills is probably the most boring, but there are ways to make it more interesting. I use a wall. To be able to pass a ball to a wall, you've got to expect the same back. So if you give a weak pass to a wall, you're going to get a weak one back. Right. It's going to make it even harder to work for. So just being creative with it, really, and giving them either time or amount of quantities, just it's a hard one to do, but you've got to do it to progress the game.
I love that. No, I love the analogy of the wall, and the I think that's fantastic. That genuinely is. I'm going to put that in the bank as well. But It's I think it's really good, like you were saying, that sort of almost creating those game situations quite early on when you were saying about the fatigue and the goal shooters. And, you know, I suppose anyone can do it before they've just played, you know, 2 quarters of netball, but can you do it in, you know, later on the last 5 minutes of a game or something like that? And I think if you're already conditioned in that's incredible. That really is. So I think it's little things like that, just those little nuggets of information that I think can be the difference, can't they, sometimes? So I think just moving on sort of within that in terms of, so my perspective as a primary school PE teacher at the minute is that netball in our area, and I don't know if it's the same for the rest of the country, is that when the girls are playing netball, it's, like the high fives, so they rotate position each sort of quarter and stuff. I don't know if that happens everywhere, but that's in the local authority that I'm in. In terms of that, you know, when does that stop? And also, you know, because I think in so many other sports could benefit from that, you know, what's the word? Basically being a utility player, being able to, you know, play in different positions, being able to react to different scenarios, because I'm sure what you're dealing with as a goalkeeper compared to a goal shooter, completely different. We're all not completely different, but they're going to be slightly different, aren't they? So I think it's so ingrained into netball players at such a young age. When does that sort of stop? And then, yeah, we'll go on from there. But yeah, when does that sort of stop and what sort of... so, do you know, I'll cut me waffling out a bit there, Becky. Sorry, I'll do that again. But so when does that stop? And also then as a coach, you know, what are you looking for in certain positions? So for example, a goalkeeper, I assume quite tall, sort of long arms, etc. What else are you looking for, if that makes sense?
I think high fives is a real beauty spot of the game. It's recently changed to be netball. So high fives was really just for years 5 and 6 in primary school, but now England Netball's brought out this new program. It starts at 5 years old, which is just a dream true for any netball mum out there, I'm sure. But you've got different ages and stages of the game. So you've got buzzers, flyers and stingers. So cute. But it's not on your ages, it's on your ability and understanding. So you might, you know, have someone who's in year 4 but is really quite capable and can go up to the older age group, and there's different methods of playing the game. So kind of the younger ones is just kind of doing multi-skills based around netball, and then as you go up it goes more competitive, like team v team, and then the older age groups is more full court, gaining that understanding of the full game, but still with the rotations, which I absolutely love. At that age, I didn't love it. I just wanted to play goal attack, and that was it. But being able to rotate and understand that this is a really hard job, this is what I've got to do, and then the next job, you've got to keep switching your hats. You go from an attacking hat to a defensive hat, which is hard to understand, but in every position you need to be able to attack and defend. So that gives these little ones a good understanding from the day dot that you have to be able to attack and you have to be able to defend, even if you think goalkeeper's the worst position in the world. And if you're a goal shooter, you're still going to have to defend.
Yeah.
So I love the way England Netball have put that in at that age group. In Australia, they don't do that. They just play 7v7.
Right.
From the youngest age possible, whereas we and New Zealand actually do 5-a-side and do the rotations. Both countries are great and always have been, always will be, but just different styles of development, I'm sure. I love the way High Fives does that, and develops girls and boys into the game. When it goes into year 7, boys netball stops, so got to put a stop to that somewhere, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, you know, so many other sports could learn from that. I know that obviously with netball you're slightly more restricted by the area of the pitch you can be in, depending on what position you're playing, but I know within football it's really, you're pigeonholed so early on as to what position you're going to be, you know, whether it be on your physical attributes or etc. So I think it's something that, you know, I've tried to take into sort of football coaching is that ability to attack and defend, for example, in different areas. But one thing that I've always, and I tried this with adults recently, and it got mixed responses in terms of the enthusiasm for it, but I can't think personally of a better sport for being able to create space for yourself than netball, because obviously, as you know a lot better than me, the way the game works, constantly being marked by someone. So it's such a unique sport, I think, in that sense, that seldom, I suppose, do you get lots of space that you haven't created yourself. So I suppose for me, from a coaching perspective, what is the best way of teaching that, in the sense of, is it more team-based or is it literally getting them sort of one-to-one, right? This is how you lose a marker. This is, do you see what I'm getting at? Is it more in sort of team scenarios, or would you do that on a more one-to-one basis in terms of teaching that skill?
I'd definitely go on an individual basis. It's losing a player is about the space that you use. It all comes down to how fast your feet are.
Yeah.
The closer the player is to marking you, the easier it is. The more space that they give you, the harder it becomes, because they've got a reaction time to be able to pick you up.
Yeah.
So to be able to bring that player in to say, you need to mark me tight, to be able to then get around them quickly is the hardest thing. But again, that's something that is developed. But I always go with the attacking moves. It's a really good kind of pre-season learning skill that you can do with any age group, really. There's just 5 attacking moves that will allow you to lose a player. But to be able to do them 5 attacking moves, you've got to put in the graft before that.
Yeah.
So you've got to create your space, you've got to identify your space, you've got to make sure you're positioning where you're going, blah, blah, blah. But as long as you've got a fast little bit of movement, or you can work your space well, even at a slow pace, you can be a defender every time. And also being creative with it. I love a little bit of flow.
No, definitely. No, I think that's it's something I've always admired about netball. And just moving on to the last specific question, Beccy, in that sense, from someone who, you know, has watched the game, and I do generally watch it when it's on Sky, and stuff like that. Well, I probably should. There's probably other places to watch it. I don't know why I sort of went for the biggest name in TV, but anyway, sometimes it can look like it's so well rehearsed and almost like a set piece. I suppose what I'm asking is how much from a restart is choreographed, and how much are you sort of, is it off the cuff, in the sense of, you know, are you just relying on the centre being able to find that right pass? I suppose I liken it to a bit like football, in the sense of, from a corner or, you know, a set piece, you can rehearse where people are going to be moving and hopefully get the ball in that area. But then when the game's then playing, it's really, as a coach, you're relying on the players to sort of think, and like you said earlier, almost that autonomy. So I suppose how much of netball is choreographed and how much is off the cuff, I suppose, is what I'm asking.
I think from when a ball starts, so from a centre pass, backline pass, sideline, it's a set play.
Right.
Especially a centre pass, you'll be able to, if you watch it and broke it down, you'll be able to figure out what set plays they've got.
Right.
It's when the ball is reset, that's when they've got to create a different sort of tactic. So it's defensively, it's being able to identify what the next 3 passes are. It's being able to anticipate, that's where the space is. Somebody's going to use that space. Let's block that off. Let's really disrupt it. And then when you see that ball swing backwards and go further back down the court, you know you're doing something well, because you're closing them down. Set plays on a centre pass are, I'm a wing attack centre, so that's kind of like my thing, my go-to. I love a set play, loads, and that's at wing attack. That's your job, to receive a centre pass. So to be able to put these set plays in advance and keep them creative and keep them flowing, so that your defence don't pick up on it, that's when you know it's going well. But same as backlines, goalkeepers, defence, bringing it out of court, they can go all the way to the halfway line. Then it's down to attack to put their tactic in play. So it's not so much a full team thing. It's probably a unit-based tactics that I certainly encourage teams, or when I'm playing as well, because doing a full court tactic, that's hard. Probably just like a corner in football. It's how do you get it in the box? We get it into the circle, but it's got to go here first. Pull that space, and straight in.
That's fascinating, actually, Becca. I wouldn't have. I've always sort of viewed football as a whole team tactic, like you said, whether it, I know it's a different sport, but the ball going from defence to attack quickly. But actually, if you break it down like that and have almost how are we going to get to this area, that's our tactic for that. And then, your front three, what's your tactic there? Actually, I think that's a really refreshing way of looking at it. And actually, I've learned a lot from that. I really appreciate this sort of you saying that, really. So I think that's it's just a different way of and breaking it down and different ways of looking at it, isn't it, in that sense? So I've got 2 more questions for you before I take up any more of your afternoon. So I suppose the first one of the last 2 it's a slightly negative question, but we'll finish on a really positive one. Is in terms of netball as a sport, you as a coach in netball as a sport, what's the biggest challenge? And what I mean is in football, for example, when I'm coaching up to about October time, because of the sunlight and stuff, I can go outside and I can go on the field and I don't need to hire facilities or things like that. Obviously, but then there's this mad scramble come beginning of October where hundreds of teams are trying to get a plastic pitch or an AstroTurf pitch, and then you'd be lucky if you've got 1/3 of a pitch and 25 lads to coach, etc. That's the problem in football. What would you say are the sort of the biggest challenges to coaching netball in terms of logistics, like facilities, etc.?
Putting my development cap on, I think facilities again. It's really hard. England Netball have brought in walking netball rules that you don't need to have a netball court. Right. You don't need to have a post. You can do it in your community centre. You can do it in your church hall, which is great. And to be able to go higher up in the netball kind of levels, finding a school, a sports centre, somewhere with a full-size netball court with facilities, that's hard. Putting on sessions is hard enough at the university because you're competing with 58 other sports, and trying to find, sports halls are very expensive. Yeah. And to be able to run a community session, to be able to generate income, you're heavily relying on volunteers, which netball is I'm gonna probably might upset a lot of people here, but netball, I think, has the highest rate of volunteers ever. Right. And everybody that's so passionate about the sport, and I think maybe it's to do with the level of growth that we're at the minute. But there are so many special people out there that are making this game grow and grow. But it really is difficult to be able to find an indoor sports hall. You can play outside, but cutting your knees on gravel, you're picking out stones for weeks. So it's never easy. But we are very grateful. We are an indoor winter sport, I have to say. When it's snowing outside and you're seeing football training, I'm not jealous.
No, I appreciate that. No, I think that's very, like you say, the logistics of sports halls is so in demand. And in our area, I can only speak for our area, we used to have 3 sports halls in Luton where I live. And now we're down to 1 that's bigger, but we've lost 2. So saying something like you say, you're missing all of the netball courts that go with that, the inside elements. So I suppose the logistics, and I suppose netball's a lot more reliant on those facilities maybe than what other sports are, because take place on grass. So I just wanted to finish off with one last question, Beccy, and I really appreciate you sort of being so honest. And you don't have to be completely honest on this question if you don't want to, but I suppose the last question I'm going to ask you is, and it's one we ask everyone, is how do you think a player who you've coached would describe you as a coach? So it could be from any part, whether it be a child or someone you coach at university, and be as specific or as generic as you like.
Oh, that is a tough one. Wow. So I think that I'd be described as approachable. Right. Brilliant. I'd like to always think I can put time aside for people, no matter if it's on or off the court. I'd like to be described as fun. I've got to make sure there's a fun part of a session every time. So I'd like to hope I'm fun.
No, definitely. No, absolutely.
Not. Some not at pre-season when I'm killing everyone off with court screens. I'm sure I'm not fun. Approachable, fun, and I'd like to be understanding. Yeah. I'd like to think that I've experienced every part of the game to be able to understand when people are feeling high or low, or to know what's going on in their brain. So I'd like to hope I'm understanding as well. Oh gosh, I hope I never ask anybody that question.
Oh no, I think that's brilliant. No, honestly, I really appreciate you being so honest about that, and I think they're three traits that you'd want in any coach. So I really appreciate you sort of talking about that, and I think you'll actually be surprised how many coaches don't have those sort of skills and traits that you were just talking about that you possess. So I think that's really I really appreciate you being so honest about that. I just need to say thank you so much, Beccy, for doing this. Just really quickly, I'll put it in the show notes, etc. But if people want to get in contact with you, whether it be through your sort of work or to talk to you, in terms of the netball, where would be the best way of getting hold of you, contacting you, social medias, etc.
So my Twitter is Beccy Lewis 18 CCY. Beccy. Anyone can get through to me on Twitter. I kind of use that as kind of showing what I do netballing. I'd like to use Twitter more. Kind of halfway through the season, I wanted to showcase what we were doing in all the different elements of coaching that I'm doing. So I'd like to post a little bit more. Obviously now it's a bit more difficult, but Twitter is a great one. Or people can email me. That would be fine as well. I'd love to hear about what other people are doing, coaching wise and things like that.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. I really appreciate that. So I'll put them in the show notes and we'll go from there. So.